Hi, and welcome to my video for my psych final project. I thought I'd do like a pillow talk podcast, video podcast thing. So this is for general psych with Dr. Togan. I feel like I should specify that for some reason. And the project was to pick a movie and then analyze the main character using theories. But anyway, the movie that I chose was A Silent Voice, and the main character is Shoya Ishida. So I guess the summary of the movie is that the story technically revolves around Shoko Nishimiya, who's a grade school student, and she has impaired hearing. She's deaf. And she transfers to a new school where she's bullied by her classmates, especially Shoya Ishida. It follows his perspective more, though, than Shoko's. But it gets to the point where she has to transfer schools because of him. And as a result, Shoya is bullied and ostracized by his classmates because he showed a lack of compassion or whatever. And so he ends up with no friends and no plans for the future. The movie actually starts with him and his suicide attempt that he backs out on. But later, after I guess all of his like sin or whatever has been weighing on him for the past, I think they say 5 years, for the past 5 years, he tries to set himself down a path of redemption, and he wants to make up for it. So I guess let's just jump into analyzing him. So Shoya's a really complex character. He exhibits a lot of behaviors when he's young that are very different from when he's older. So when I think the best way to go about this is analyzing. I analyzed him when he was younger and when he was older, as though there were two different characters, but they're not. They're both him because he changes so drastically. So, but I think some of the theories hold regardless. So I guess we'll start off with the stages of development. I feel like that's a good place to start. Even though we see an aggressive technically behavior when Shoya's younger, where he's like wrestling with his friends and stuff like that. He's technically more rebellious. He likes to jump into the rivers and stuff, which isn't actually allowed. In Japan, you can't jump into the rivers for whatever reason. He definitely shows dependency and like the tendency to believe in things and the dependency to swallow anything a lot more. It's a lot more prominent, I think, especially as he gets older. So this directly is Freud's oral stage is what we're going to be talking about more specifically. So to start off, if we're starting from when he was younger to when he gets older, after everything happened with Shoko, where he was bullying her relentlessly, and she ends up losing 8 of her hearing aids, and he's finally getting in trouble for it. And his mom is like, we're gonna go over to her house, we're gonna apologize to her family, you're gonna apologize to her family, and I don't want to hear any complaining or anything. On their way to Shoko's family home, his mom stops at the bank, takes out a sum of money to, it's implied that it's paying for the lost hearing aids. And hearing aids are expensive, so it's a lot of money. So And then they get to the family home, and Shoya's mom basically tells him to just wait where he is. Like, don't move, like, you're only going to cause more trouble if you do anything. And she takes care of the entire situation. She approaches Shoko's mom. I guess we should just refer to them because their names are so similar as Ishida and Nishimiya. That's how I'm going to refer to them. So Ishida's mom approaches Nishimiya's mom and essentially is apologizing and everything, and motions for him to wait where he is while they go talk more privately. And he doesn't actually do anything throughout the entire scene that is even remotely apologizing. His mom does everything for him. So that shows his dependency on his mom. And after everything too, like once he moves into middle school and his friends start bullying him, he still has faith in them. He still believes that they're his friends. And he even approaches them with a CD that he thought that they would all like. He says, "Hey guys, like, I got this CD. Do you want to listen to it together?" And they're like, "Since you like that band, we don't anymore." And like up until that point, he had thought that they were still friends, even though they were bullying him the same way that he had bullied Nishimiya. So, and then he's also just generally a very soft-spoken person as he gets older. So that's how he fits into the Freud's oral stage and how he was overindulged. I guess I should have specified that in the beginning. He was overindulged in the oral stage of development, according, if we're talking about Freud's theories. Moving into Freud's anal theory on the stages of development, he is more rebellious, and his laid-back demeanor when he's younger implies that he would have had a lack of discipline in the anal stage. And his mom definitely does seem like a more laid-back person. She has 3 generations living under her house, and she's a single mom. So you can assume that she probably wouldn't have time to deal with her children or be super strict, and she's a hairstylist, so she's the breadwinner of the family. But she does mention also to him after his own suicide attempt that his room was clean for the first time ever. And I think that's really important because I guess it's supposed to be one of like the telltale signs that someone had a lack of discipline in the anal stage is when they're messier. And so his room being clean for the first time ever shows that he had that lack of discipline if it was the first time his room had ever been clean. But so that is the Freud's anal stage of development covered. Moving into punishment and reinforcement, Shoya decides that he needs to atone for these for his sin of bullying Shoko relentlessly in one way or another. He feels like he realizes what he did wrong. He realizes that something needs to be done about it. And he decides that the best way would be to remove himself entirely, or as much as he can, from social situations. And so in other words, he isolates himself as a form of self-punishment. This, I would believe, would be negative punishment. So the take away to stop a behavior. So he's taking away any sort of social situation, which he seems to have liked when he was younger, in order to stop his bullying and troublemaking behavior. So, and it works. I mean, he does stop bullying. So that is his negative punishment of himself. He does this to himself. So I want to move into prejudice and discrimination, because it's basically the plot of the movie. Is the prejudice against Shoko when they were younger and how it impacts their lives now. So in his youth, Shoya and his friends definitely exhibit signs of prejudice against Shoko and her being deaf. So, more specifically, this would be an example of ableism. So they think they're better than her, or that they don't need to cater to her because she's deaf. I guess, like, more specifically, if we're talking about, like, very specific examples where this all happens, Shoko asks people to write in a notebook when they want to communicate with her, and everyone just actively doesn't, or they write, like, really mean, nasty stuff in the notebook. They never show anything specifically what is said, but they show, like, terrible doodles. They're in 6th grade, so there's, like, doodles of poop. Doodles of feces, pardon. In the notebook, and he also, she has hearing aids, so he sits right behind her, so he'll yell through, a rolled up notebook to startle her. They steal her hearing aids, they throw them, all of this stuff to bully her, and which exhibits their prejudice against her and her being deaf specifically. It seems like a lot of this stuff is targeted at her deafness more than just her. So they do act on these feelings and actively discriminate against Shoko for her disability, and that's the prejudice and discrimination against her. Eventually, though, when Shoya Ishida is called out by his teacher for bullying Shoko, the way the scene plays out is the principal comes into the room, a major authority figure. The teachers are also there, who's also an authority figure. And the principal's just discussing, like, everyone has probably noticed by now that Shoko's not in class. We got a call from her mom saying that 8 of her hearing aids have gone missing, and that these are very expensive, so if anyone knows if she's being bullied or who is bullying her, we ask that you come forward. And Shoya is visibly on the verge of coming forward on his own volition, but his teacher calls him out. He says, like, Shoya, we all know it's you, so stand up. And when he doesn't stand up immediately, he hits the board with his fist. A very aggressive teacher. He hits the board with his fist and yells at him to stand up. And he does. So fast. So that's an example of obedience. He does it without hesitation or question. He just stands up when his teacher tells him to, and that's an authority figure. Especially when you're in 6th grade, your teacher's an authority figure. So, that's a very obvious example of it. We're gonna get, I guess, into a little bit of a darker place here. With a psychological disorder. Based on what I viewed from the movie, I believe that we see enough evidence that Shoya has generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. So Shoya assumes that the people in his class are talking about him behind his back always. For whatever reason, he thinks that they're always talking behind his back. And he even makes up dialogue for himself based on what he thinks others think of him. So it's that shows the unnecessary anxiety in things, anxiety for no reason, in situations where you really shouldn't. So that's a generalized anxiety disorder. He thinks that people are saying things like, oh, he's looking over here again. I wonder if he gets lonely, being alone all the time, or, what a freak, or why does he bother living? These are direct quotes. I had to pause the movie and quote it exactly because that's how I am. But so he's always worried about what others are thinking about him, and so this shows like the signs of obsession with what people are saying or thinking, and that's a big part of the generalized anxiety disorder, is the obsession, and which turns into the anxiety is having that obsession with these things turns into the anxiety. So I think that he definitely has anxiety, but I also think he has panic disorder because at his school's fair, Shoya, he finds himself having trouble looking people in the eye, which I guess he always had, but it's especially bad right now. He's just gotten out of the hospital for being in a coma. And it's his first time back at school. And he can't look people in the... He can't do it. He just can't bring himself to look anyone in the eye, not even his best friend, Nagatsuka. So he finds himself feeling really nauseous and dizzy simply by being in this public setting, and nausea and dizziness are signs of panic disorder. Like he seems to visibly be having a panic attack, and he excuses himself into the restroom where he just sits and kind of hyperventilates for a moment until his friend Nagatsuka comes and finds him and then asks him, like, why aren't you looking at me? And he's like, oh, like, I'm fine. If you could just leave me alone, that'd be great. So for that reason, I think that he has panic disorder. I'm going to move into defense mechanisms. So after his friends, his new friends, like this is towards the end of the movie, after his friends find out that he had been a bully to Shoko, and they try to learn more and discuss the situation, and he just assumes that they're all gonna hate him, like without any context, like they don't even know the specifics yet. So he just shuts down because just the fact that they found out is overwhelming to him. So he shuts down. He starts attacking all of them and telling them their own flaws, and questioning them and their motives. And so he says that his friend Miyoko, she runs away from everything. That's what he says to her. He says that his friend Miki loves the sound of her own voice. Nagatsuka doesn't really know him, like he barely knows him. And Satoshi, he says his friend Satoshi isn't actually part of their group. He's never been part of their group, so he shouldn't be able to have an opinion on the matter. But he does this in such a calm manner that it's hard to really... It was hard for me to figure out how to place this, because it's very obviously a defense mechanism, but it was hard to place which one. So he sits in a very calm manner. He's sitting kind of in the fetal position, like he's sitting like crisscross applesauce, but like kind of up, and he's just like kind of in on it himself. And he doesn't look anyone in the eye when he says any of this. But I still think that it's regression. Because regression is essentially throwing a temper tantrum when things don't go your way. And things aren't going his way. He didn't intend, I don't think, on any of his friends discussing this, because some of his friends already knew about it, but they didn't talk about it. It was never talked about. So he didn't intend for anyone to talk about this ever, and for this to ever be a thing that came up within their friendships. So he throws a tantrum about it in a very calm manner, but he does. I think it's still a form of regression because he's still very much attacking people. So that's one of his defense mechanisms. He has a lot of them. But so the next one is that after bullying Shoko for being deaf and like showing his definite ableism, and this causes her to switch schools and loses 8 of her hearing aids, whatever. He decides to take up learning sign language, I think, as a way to kind of deal with his guilt. And I think it's still a defense mechanism, though. I think it's reaction formation. Because he does the opposite of the thing that he did. He preaches the opposite of the, I guess, technically bad thing. Which is essentially what reaction formation is built around, doing the opposite of the thing that you're being called out on or are in trouble for. So, I think his sign language after bullying Shoko for being deaf is a form of reaction formation. That one might be a stretch, though. And finally, I think that Shoya exhibits rationalization. I think that after he tries to make himself look less guilty when he's called out by his teacher when he's young. So going back to that entire situation when the principal comes in and his teacher yells at him to stand up because everyone knows that it's him. He's trying to make himself look less guilty. He doesn't deny it necessarily. But after being called out by his teacher for being the bully, he says that it's unfair that he's getting in trouble, that he's the only one getting in trouble because all of the other kids were doing it with him. He claims that Miki, who's generally very soft-spoken and nice, that she was bullying Shoko, which I guess you could argue that she wasn't doing anything to stop him. But he says, like, all of his friends that were doing it with him, he calls them out, and he says, like it wasn't just me, everyone was doing it. And I think I think that is a version of rationalization, because it's everyone else was doing it too kind of thing. Doesn't make it any less bad, but it makes it normalized. And he does this again later on in the film when Miki, I mentioned her earlier, when Miki calls him out again, and this is how all of his friends find out or start the discussion about the fact that he had bullied Shoko in the past. So Miki calls him out again about the bullying, saying that he bullied her or he bullied Shoko and everything when they were young, and he counters her with the argument that she did it too. He looks at her and he said, "That's not fair. You did it too, Miki. Like, don't act less guilty than I am." And she counters her argument and everything. It just goes back and forth. So with that, the unacceptable action would be bullying Shoko, but his acceptable excuse or his normalized excuse would be that the other kids were doing it too. But there, I think there's a lot that could probably be said about this film. Those are all the examples that I have, at least ones that I have written down. And I really thank you for listening to this 25-minute video. It was I think it deserves a watch. I really can't do it justice just explaining things and explaining one character. But, yeah. So that's the general insight on Shoya and his entire personality. I'm sure there's more that I missed, but that is all for now. Thank you so much for this, and I actually did have a lot of fun with this project, so thanks. Bye.